Your current life is a byproduct of an invisible architecture forged a decade ago. The 2010s weren't just years on a calendar. They were a centrifuge of systemic shocks, broken trust, and digital betrayal that rewired your brain. Your nervous system was under constant siege from a world without a resolution. In today's episode, we are dissecting the source code of your resilience. We look specifically at a blog post from published author Jeremy Brunansky. This is a diagnostic audit of how ancient philosophy paired with modern myth and beautiful, accomplished women built your mental fortress. By the end of today's episode, you'll be able to identify how the media you consume impacts the view you hold on your world. Grab your coffee, tea, or wine. It's time for the sidebar.
Have you ever, stopped to think about how the pop culture you consumed back in 2014 is just secretly dictating your life right now?
Oh, absolutely. It's happening constantly.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we aren't looking at history from behind museum glass or anything. We are dissecting the decade of 2010 to 2019.
Which is a fascinating era.
It really is. It's a cultural landscape that is actively shaping the way you, the listener, scroll on your phone, the movies you pay to see, and, the way you react to a news headline today.
Yeah, because it is a living, breathing architecture. I mean, we often think of decades as just numbers on the calendar, right? But they are incubators. They literally birth the underlying behavioral algorithms that we operate on right now.
Exactly. And to figure out the mechanics of this, we are looking through a highly specific lens today. We're unpacking a 2010 to 2019 retrospective written by Jeremy Brunansky.
Yes, the perspective he brings is so unique.
Yeah, the mission here isn't just nostalgia. We are going to examine the chaotic landscape of the 2010s, the overwhelming news, the massive cinematic escapes, the soundtrack that defined the era, and even a modernized take on the ancient concept of the muse. But we're doing it to extract the mechanics of resilience for you. How do you use these cultural touchstones to stay inspired and motivated today?
And to really grasp that, you have to understand where the author is coming from. Because, this isn't just a casual blogger listing his favorite movies.
Yeah, definitely not.
He is an AI professional, so he understands revenue operations, digital marketing, the whole algorithmic side of modern life. But simultaneously, he has this incredibly deep foundation in the classical arts.
Yeah, he was trained in classical voice, right?
Exactly. He plays jazz percussion, he writes short films.
So he's looking at the decade through the eyes of a data scientist and an artist at the exact same time.
Yes.
Which means he's looking for the source code of human behavior during a very chaotic time. And, the backdrop for this analysis is just staggering.
It's intense.
He introduces this concept of the butterfly effect, right? How small positive interactions can completely change massive life outcomes. But he frames it against this really intense period of personal turbulence.
And this is the crucial through line we have to keep in mind for this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
While he is writing this massive retrospective and making films and playing drums in an R&B band, he is also enduring over 900 days of unemployment.
Over 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Just submitting applications into a total void. And the job he eventually takes to survive, it involves walking 5 aisles of 46 rows in this massive warehouse.
It's brutal.
He's pulling clothes out of boxes, placing them in blue bins, sending them down a conveyor belt. He is walking 20,000 steps a day in this incredibly grueling, repetitive environment.
But think about the algorithmic nature of that physical reality. Walking 20,000 steps, repeating the exact same mechanical motion over and over.
Yeah, it's like a loop.
Exactly. Yet his internal drive is entirely focused on forward motion. He is hitting the gym, he's writing books, he's engaging with classical philosophy.
He's actively utilizing the pop culture of the 2010s. The music, the movies, the books, using them as tools to ensure that his external circumstances do not dictate his internal momentum.
Which is such a powerful framework.
It really is, because from that intense personal micro level, we kind of have to zoom out to the macro, right? Why was the culture of the 2010s so aggressively consumed by all of us?
Because we needed it.
Yeah, why did we need these movies and songs so badly? Because the real world was just throwing systemic shocks at us on a daily basis.
Constant shocks.
Let's just look at the sheer volume of foundational shifts he lists in the source material. We had the rollout of Obamacare, WikiLeaks, Edward Snowden's revelations about government spying.
The FBI controversies.
Right, drone strikes, Benghazi, and the crazy reality TV to presidency trajectory of Donald Trump.
And It is absolutely vital to note the political neutrality of how all this is presented in the retrospective. Both left-leaning and right-leaning controversies are placed side by side on the ledger.
Yeah, he doesn't take sides.
No, the implementation of Obamacare is right next to President Obama using drones overseas.
Yeah.
The FBI controversies sit right next to the rise of Trump. It isn't a partisan critique at all.
It's just a data set of chaos.
Precisely.
I want to stop on Snowden for a second, though, because I feel like this is where the AI professional's lens is so important to this deep dive.
Oh, definitely.
If you are finding out your own government is spying on you through your digital devices, I mean, doesn't that fundamentally shatter the psychological contract you have with technology?
It rewrites the source code of societal trust. Because, before Snowden, the smartphone was viewed largely as a tool of ultimate convenience.
Like a shiny new toy.
Right. But after Snowden, it became a panopticon. From an algorithm perspective, you suddenly realize that you are the data being harvested.
Wow, yeah.
It birthed the modern era of digital skepticism and that desperate need for digital boundaries that you, the listener, feel right now when an app asks to track your location.
Oh, right. When you get that little pop-up today asking allow app to track, the hesitation you feel was forged right there in the 2010s.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just political paranoia. Mother Nature was aggressively in the mix, too. The source contrasts natural and man-made disasters. Hurricanes Irma and Harvey, the devastating Haiti earthquake, the rise of ISIS, the Ebola outbreak in Africa.
It was a very dark time in the news.
It really was.
Huh.
But he contrasts that with profound moments of human achievement. The Olympics, the World Cup, the first photo of a black hole.
The duality of the decade is staggering.
Okay, let me push back on how we process that duality, though.
Yeah.
If you're walking 20,000 steps in a warehouse, or if you're the listener today stuck in a doom-scrolling loop on your phone, how does knowing about the Olympics balance out the rise of ISIS?
Well, it doesn't always feel balanced.
Right. It feels like the negative always carries more psychological weight.
It does. I mean, evolutionary biology dictates that we pay more attention to threats, which is exactly why the author highlights the medical breakthroughs of the decade. This is how you actively counter the weight of the negative.
Okay.
He specifically points to a patient in London who received a stem cell transplant and his HIV became undetectable. And even more specifically, the development of carbon ion therapy for bone and soft tissue cancers.
Break that down for me, like why that specific therapy?
Because it is a mechanical, undeniable triumph over chaos. Carbon ion therapy literally uses heavy ions to attack the DNA of cancer cells that are resistant to traditional radiation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it causes double-strand DNA breaks in the tumor. It is precision engineering applied to human survival. The author is presenting this to the reader to say, hey, while the news cycle is screaming about political collapse and natural disasters are leveling cities, human innovation is quietly, methodically curing the incurable in the background.
Okay, I see the utility in that. It's an intentional recentering.
Yep.
So when the listener today feels overwhelmed by a geopolitical crisis on Twitter or wherever, remembering that science is currently rewriting DNA to cure cancer provides a logical, factual anchor. It proves that the chaos does not negate the progress.
Precisely. You have to actively feed your brain the data of human triumph, or the algorithm of the news cycle will just default you to despair.
So if the real world is this centrifuge of political leaks, terrorism, and natural disasters, how did the collective culture cope? Where did we go for a safety net?
We went to the movies.
Right. According to the retrospective, we retreated into the dark, air-conditioned sanctuaries of massive movie theaters. And this is where the author makes a very bold claim. He states that Kevin Feige is the most influential producer of the past decade.
The architect of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Nah.
From a structural standpoint, it's a fascinating argument.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. Calling the guy who produces movies about talking raccoons and magic hammers the most influential producer of the decade.
I know how it sounds.
What about the auteurs? Are we really saying that churning out formulaic, CGI-heavy superhero sequels is the pinnacle of 2010's cinema?
You are looking at the content, but you need to look at the narrative mechanics. What Feige did was entirely unprecedented in film. He took the serialization of comic books and the episodic nature of television, and he applied it to blockbuster feature films.
So it wasn't just sequels.
No, he built an interconnected ecosystem. It required long-term audience investment, culminating in the massive cultural events of Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame.
Okay, so he built a monopoly, but why does that matter to our psychological survival of the decade?
Because of what we just discussed about the real world. The real world of the 2010s had no clear narrative arc.
That's true.
Snowden leaks a massive trove of documents, and, well, what happens? There's no satisfying resolution. ISIS rises, earthquakes devastate nations. The real world was messy, unresolved, and fundamentally unsafe. The MCU offered the exact opposite.
A guaranteed resolution.
Yes. It was a structural safety net for the collective psyche. The MCU offered a promise, basically saying, if you invest your time in these characters over 10 years, we will reward you. The good guys will assemble. The threat will be vanquished. Order will be restored.
Wow.
Think about the author walking those 20,000 steps in the warehouse. His reality is repetitive and financially uncertain. The real world is politically volatile. Going to the theater to see Captain America hold the line isn't just escapism. It's a desperate psychological need for narrative order.
That reframes it entirely. It's not about the CGI, it's about the reliability of the narrative structure.
Exactly.
But the retrospective doesn't just focus on the blockbusters. It balances the Marvel and Star Wars juggernauts with a completely different kind of cinema. The Oscars.
The critical darlings. They provide the necessary friction to the blockbuster's smooth resolutions.
The variety of Best Picture winners he lists is wild. You have the gritty, boots-on-the-ground reality of The Hurt Locker and Spotlight.
Yep.
And then you have the stylistic, almost dreamlike triumphs of Birdman, Moonlight, and The Shape of Water.
Let's dissect the mechanics of a film like Spotlight, actually, because it perfectly mirrors the decade's overarching theme of broken trust.
Oh, that makes sense.
Just as Snowden revealed the broken trust of the government, Spotlight is an intricate, methodical examination of processing institutional betrayal by the church. It wasn't a film about a single bad actor. It was about uncovering a systemic failure.
Which forces the audience to sit with a deeply uncomfortable reality. There are no superheroes coming to punch the corruption away.
Exactly. And then you look at Moonlight, which the author also highlights. Moonlight uses deeply intentional pacing, intimate camera work, and highly specific color palettes. It forces the viewer to sit with the complexities of identity, vulnerability, and systemic poverty.
So it's not a quick fix.
No, it requires a completely different type of cognitive engagement than an Avengers movie.
So why does looking back at this cinematic duality help the listener today?
It's about auditing your narrative diet. We are currently living in an era dominated by 15-second TikToks and Instagram Reels. The algorithm is feeding you micro-stories that resolve instantly, constantly spiking your dopamine and moving on. Looking back at the massive cinematic achievements of the 2010s reminds the listener of the vital importance of long-term narrative patience.
I see. If your brain is only trained to accept 15-second resolutions, you completely lose the capacity to engage with a complex problem in your own life.
You lose the ability to sit in the discomfort. A movie like Moonlight, or the 10-year build-up to Endgame, demands that you sit in the dark and pay attention. It exercises the muscle of sustained focus.
Right.
If you want to build resilience today, you have to actively resist the 15-second algorithmic feed and force yourself to engage with long-form narrative.
That makes total sense. So if movies were the visual escape and the exercise in narrative patience, the music of the 2010s was the visceral, emotional soundtrack.
Absolutely.
It literally scored the day-to-day survival of the decade.
Music bypasses the logical centers of the brain and goes straight to the limbic system.
Yeah.
It is the most direct tool for emotional regulation we possess.
And the duality we saw in the news and the movies is perfectly mirrored in the music charts. The author breaks this down beautifully. On one end of the spectrum, the absolute top songs of the decade are pure, unadulterated, neon-colored escapism.
Yes.
Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars. Party Rock Anthem by LMFAO.
Pure kinetic energy engineered in a studio.
Right. But sitting right next to Party Rock Anthem on the charts, the top albums of the decade are defined by deep acoustic heartache. Adele's 21 and 25, Ed Sheeran's Divide.
It is a massive juxtaposition, and it tells us exactly how the collective consciousness was trying to regulate itself.
I struggle with the Party Rock Anthem piece of this, to be honest.
Really? How so?
Well, how does a decade defined by the rise of ISIS and the Ebola outbreak make LMFAO a defining cultural touchstone? Are we just sticking our fingers in our ears and trying to dance the anxiety away? It feels deeply cynical to me.
It's not cynical, though. It's a mechanical release valve. Remember the AI lens. The human nervous system can only sustain a state of high alert for so long before it crashes.
Okay.
When the pressure cooker of the real world, the systemic shocks we discuss when it gets too intense, society historically swings toward highly produced, rhythm-heavy, repetitive dance music.
Oh, like disco?
Exactly. We saw it with disco in the late 70s during the Cold War and economic stagflation, and we saw it in the 2010s.
So Uptown Funk is basically an engineered neurological reset.
Exactly. It isn't ignoring the world, it is providing a mathematically precise 3-minute vacation from it. The heavy bass, the predictable 4/4 time signature, the repetitive hook, it is designed to force the body into movement and temporarily shut down the prefrontal cortex where anxiety lives.
Wow. Okay, but then why does Adele dominate the album charts? If we just want to shut down the anxiety, why are we buying millions of copies of an album about devastating heartbreak?
Because you cannot live on sugar alone. The dance tracks provide the communal release in the club or the gym, but people needed a way to process their individual, isolated grief.
That makes sense.
Think about the author in the warehouse. When you are walking 20,000 steps a day, facing 900 days of professional rejection, a manufactured dance track only gets you so far. Adele's 21 offers profound, organic vulnerability. It validates the struggle.
And you see this exact pendulum swing in the Grammy Album of the Year winners he lists. Society is literally bouncing back and forth between what it needs.
Let's trace that evolution because it's fascinating. It starts with Arcade Fire's The Suburbs and Mumford & Sons' Sigh No More.
Very acoustic, organic indie folk. Guys playing banjos and vests.
Society was craving authenticity. Stripped down, real instruments, tangible reality. But then the pendulum swings hard the other way to Daft Punk's Random Access Memories.
Shiny, electronic, futuristic escapism made by guys in robot helmets.
Exactly. Then it pivots back to the highly polished, autobiographical pop of Taylor Swift's 1989. And eventually it lands on the intimate, introspective country pop of Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour. The culture is algorithmically hunting for emotional equilibrium.
So applying this to the listener today, how does this deep dive into the 2010s charts help someone listening right now?
It reveals the power of conscious curation. Right now, most of us let Spotify or Apple Music dictate our emotional state. We hit play on a generated playlist, and the algorithm feeds us more of what we previously clicked.
Yeah, we just passively consume it.
But if you look at how music functioned in the 2010s, you realize it is an emotional toolkit.
You have to become the architect of your own soundtrack.
Exactly. If you understand that you have the power to put on Uptown Funk when you need a kinetic release valve, or Adele when you need to sit with a loss, you are taking control of your internal environment. You are anchoring your mood with intentionality, rather than letting an app dictate how you feel.
Okay, so music and movies provide the emotional and visual regulation, but to actually survive the decade, to maintain that forward momentum while walking the warehouse aisles, the author relied on his brain box.
The bookshelf. This is where the synthesis of his dual background, the technologist and the classicist, truly crystallizes.
This reading list is fascinating because it is a completely schizophrenic diet of high philosophy and pulp fiction. Let's look at what's inside. He is reading John Locke's 2 treatises of government, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract. He's reading Carl Jung's Modern Man in Search of a Soul, but he's also reading Bob Iger's memoir about being the CEO of Disney and Groucho Marx.
It's a search for the foundational rules of human organization.
But sitting right next to Rousseau and Locke, literally on the same shelf, are graphic novels. Batman Hush, Moon Knight, Doctor Strange. I need you to explain this to me.
I get why it seems odd.
Yeah, because reading 18th century political philosophy alongside a comic book about a billionaire dressed as a bat seems completely contradictory.
Not if you view it through the lens of someone looking for the structural code of reality. Let's break down the philosophy first. Why read Rousseau's The Social Contract during the 2010s?
Because the social contract was currently on fire.
Precisely. We talked about Snowden, WikiLeaks, and institutional betrayal. The author is watching the modern systems of governance fail or breach public trust. So he goes back to the source code. Rousseau and Locke established the theoretical framework of why societies function, the balance of liberty and authority. The author is reading the original architectural blueprints of society to understand why the modern house is crumbling.
Okay, that makes sense. It's an intellectual grounding. But where does Batman fit into that?
Think about the UI/UX. The user interface of societal values. Philosophy is the back-end code. It's dense, theoretical, and hard to parse. Mythology is the front-end user interface. It takes those complex ideas about justice, order, and chaos and makes them viscerally understandable.
And comic books are our modern mythology.
Exactly. This is where Carl Jung comes in. The author is reading Jung, who theorized about the collective unconscious and archetypes. Jung would argue that Batman is a modern iteration of the shadow archetype. The dark, repressed parts of the human psyche weaponized for the sake of order.
Hold on, let me make sure I grasp that. You're saying he's reading the clinical psychological theory of the human mind with Jung and then turning to a graphic novel to see the practical mythological application of it.
Yes. Batman Hush isn't just a story about a guy punching villains. It's an exploration of trauma, trust, and identity. Moon Knight is a literal exploration of fractured psychology and divine avatars. Doctor Strange deals with the manipulation of reality itself.
It's all connected.
He isn't just consuming content, he is cross-referencing the highest levels of classical theory with the most accessible forms of modern pop culture.
So, what is the takeaway for the listener today regarding their own brain box? Why should they care about pairing Rousseau with graphic novels?
It is the ultimate strategy for mental resilience. When you only consume current news, every crisis feels unprecedented. It feels like the end of the world. But when you actively consume historical philosophy alongside enduring modern fiction, it teaches you a deeply comforting truth. The chaotic events of today are not new.
They are just modern variations of old code.
Exactly. Humanity has navigated broken social contracts before. Humanity has always needed mythological heroes to inspire justice when the real world feels unjust. When you realize you are just part of a long historical continuum, you stop panicking. You contextualize your struggle.
Right.
That is how a person survives over 2 years of unemployment without collapsing. You build a mental fortress out of history and myth.
That is a profound shift in perspective. You realize you aren't the first person to face the abyss.
Okay, we have covered the political shocks, the cinematic escapism, the musical regulation, and the philosophical bedrock, but we have to move to the final section of this retrospective, and this is where the tone shifts significantly.
Yes, it does. We move from intellectual structure to highly visceral, active motivation.
The author closes his retrospective by celebrating what he terms the muse.
And he defines this very specifically. He celebrates beautiful, successful women as the ultimate muse. Now, obviously, this is a concept as old as human history, but the way he explores it, and specifically the names he places side by side, reveals a profound technological and cultural shift that happened right in the middle of the 2010s.
We really need to unpack the historical context he uses to frame this, because it establishes the intended psychological mechanism.
Right, he frames this not as passive observation, but as an active catalyst for behavioral change. He brings up the Trojan War being fought over Helen of Troy. He mentions Samson and Delilah, David and Bathsheba from the biblical texts. The core message he is presenting is about the intoxicating effect that beauty has historically had on men, driving them to massive action.
Notice the specific behavioral output he is aiming for, though. He isn't talking about static objectification. He is talking about the psychology of aspiration and self-improvement.
He's incredibly explicit about the desired outcome. He says, let them inspire you to get off the couch and get your life together. He makes the point that these highly successful women aren't looking for a project or another mouth to feed. They want a partner who can walk side by side with them through life. The muse is positioned as the ultimate catalyst for momentum. It's the reason you push through the 20,000 steps, the reason you write the book, the reason you build yourself up.
Throughout history, the muse has always represented an ideal to strive toward. But the true analytical deep dive here is looking at the specific UI/UX of the muse in the 2010s. Because the list of names he provides is split into two very distinct categories that completely redefine how we interact with aspiration.
Yes, let's look at the names. On one hand, you have traditional massive Hollywood royalty. Scarlett Johansson, Angelina Jolie, Margot Robbie, Brie Larson, Gal Gadot.
The classic silver screen sirens.
But listed right alongside them, in the exact same alphabetical list without any distinction, are social media influencers and models. Abigail Ratchford, Demi Rose, Veronica Billick, Lindsay Pellis, and Joe Gard.
This juxtaposition represents a massive paradigm shift in the digital economy of the decade.
I want to break down the psychological difference here because it feels huge. A Hollywood actress like Scarlett Johansson or Angelina Jolie is like a star in the night sky.
Right.
You can look at it, it's beautiful, it is larger than life, but you know intrinsically that you can never touch it. It exists in a completely different, heavily guarded stratosphere. But a social media influencer, like Abigail Ratchford or Veronica Billick, they are living right inside your phone.
Let's examine the mechanics of that shift. The first tier, the Hollywood actress, relies entirely on the big screen. They act through meticulously written scripts, directed by people like Kevin Feige or Jordan Peele. They project an unattainable, manufactured perfection.
Yeah, completely untouchable.
They're surrounded by publicists, makeup teams, and velvet ropes. The psychological relationship is strictly one way. You buy a ticket, you observe the grand illusion, and you leave.
It's passive consumption of an ideal.
Exactly. But the second tier, the social media influencers, the Demi Roses and the Lindsay Pellas of the 2010s, they're built on a completely different architecture. They're built on the illusion and sometimes the reality of direct access.
The parasocial feedback loop.
Yes. You can leave a comment on their post. You can send a direct message. They might like your comment. They might even message you back. There is a perceived level of attainability that simply did not exist before the smartphone era. They share their morning coffee, their gym routines, the behind-the-scenes chaos of their photo shoots.
The screen got smaller and the distance disappeared. But I want to challenge this. Isn't this just the gamification of human attention?
How do you mean?
Well, the algorithmic platforms like Instagram, Twitter, they're designing these parasocial interactions to keep you endlessly scrolling. How is this attainability actually helpful to the author or the listener? Isn't it just a more addictive form of distraction?
That is the danger of it, absolutely. If you only consume the content, it is just a distraction. But the author's message is about utilizing the difference between the two tiers for actionable motivation.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. How does the listener use this today?
You have to understand the difference between the aspirational and the actionable. Whether your personal muse is a romantic ideal, a professional role model like a billionaire CEO, or an artistic inspiration, you have to know what kind of energy you are drawing from them.
Okay.
The aspirational muse, the movie star, the massive CEO, gives you a grand overarching vision. They represent the absolute pinnacle of human achievement in their field. But because they are untouchable, they can sometimes make your own goals feel impossible.
Right. If your goal is to be Steve Jobs, you might just give up because the gap between you and him is impossibly wide. You can't ask Steve Jobs for advice.
Precisely. But the actionable muse, the influencer, the local business leader, the person who is just 3 steps ahead of you and might actually respond to a DM that best, they provide tangible day-to-day motivation. They prove that the steps are possible. You can see their daily grind.
Oh, I see.
The author looked at both. He looked at the massive scale of Hollywood to set his overarching vision, but he also looked at the daily, grinding, entrepreneurial success of influencers building multi-million-dollar empires from their phones.
They're running their own revenue operations, marketing, and branding.
Exactly. It forces you, the listener today, to audit your own sources of motivation. What truly gets you off the couch? Is it the grand, untouchable dream of the silver screen? Or is it the tangible, interactive success you see on your smartphone?
It's a spectrum.
In a highly digital world, you need both. You need the unreachable star to guide your ultimate trajectory and the reachable milestone to keep you moving forward today. You use the inspiration to build yourself into someone capable of walking side by side with success.
That is a brilliant synthesis. You need the grand vision and the tangible proof of concept. And if you pull all these threads together, you begin to see the holistic roadmap the author left us in this retrospective.
It is a meticulously constructed architecture for navigating chaos.
We started with a decade defined by immense political turbulence, institutional betrayal, and natural disasters. We saw how the serialized, predictable resolutions of the Marvel Cinematic Universe provided a psychological safety net. We unpacked how the charts bounce between the kinetic release valve of dance music and the authentic vulnerability of acoustic heartache, allowing for vital emotional regulation. We explored how reading the foundational code of philosophy alongside modern mythology builds an impenetrable mental fortress. And finally, we saw how the evolving UI of the muse, shifting from the untouchable Hollywood star to the interactive influencer, provides the actionable motivation to get off the couch.
And tying it all together is the image of the author, facing 900 days of unemployment, walking 20,000 steps a day in a warehouse, pulling clothes from boxes.
The message of extreme resilience and relentless self-improvement is the engine of this entire deep dive. It proves that you can endure profound professional exile and personal turbulence if you know how to actively curate your inputs. You don't have to be a victim of the cultural centrifuge.
It is the ultimate lesson in human agency. The world will always throw systemic shocks at you. There will always be a new geopolitical crisis, a new economic downturn, a new algorithm designed to harvest your attention.
Yeah, that's never going to stop.
But you control the architecture of your response. You control the books in your brain box. You curate the soundtrack that regulates your nervous system. You choose the muses that inspire your forward motion.
We have covered incredible ground today, breaking down the mechanics of an entire decade. From the macro-level shifts of society right down to the micro moments of the butterfly effect. But as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, something that builds on everything we've discussed today.
We just spent an hour dissecting the highly specific pop culture artifacts that defined one man's survival of the past decade. But think about the digital footprint you are actively leaving right now, today.
That's a huge question.
If someone were to compile a retrospective of your influences 10 years from today, the news links you consistently clicked, the narrative arcs you consumed, the algorithms you allowed to feed your brain, the muses you followed on your screen, what story would that retrospective tell about who you are actively becoming?
Are you building a functional brain box, or are you just allowing yourself to be distracted by the centrifuge? That is a profound question to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep creating your inputs, and above all, stay inspired.